Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 2019 Judge Training Webinar for the National History Day Regional Competition of Bucks and Montgomery Counties. First, I want to see if everyone could just open the chat and at least please let me know if you can hear me. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Great. So we are going to get started, and as other judges join the webinar, they can listen in as well. So my name is Olivia Brown. Many of you have received emails from me. I'm the Community Programs Coordinator for the Mercer Museum and Fonthill Castle. Mercer Museum and Fonthill Castle are operated by the Bucks County Historical Society and are regional coordinators for this contest for the two counties. Welcome to our training. What we're going to do tonight is provide you with the important information about being an NHD judge. And you'll hear me say NHD a lot. It helps when having to say National History Day over and over. This will be useful for both new and past judges. And I'm going to start by going through all the material, and then at the end, we will leave some time for questions. At any time, you can write your questions in the chat and I'll see them in real time and then answer them at the end of the webinar. For those who would like to review this information afterward, and for judges who can't make it to tonight's webinar, we will be uploading and sending out the recording for future use as well. First of all, I want to thank everyone for virtually being with us here tonight, and most of all for volunteering to be a judge at this year's contest. Whether it's continued support or new support this year, we could not do this without our judges. You are all crucial to making National History Day a success. We really appreciate that you're volunteering your time to help students in our area as they aim to move their projects onto the state and possibly national level. What is National History Day? National History Day is a highly regarded academic program for elementary and secondary students. It's a nationwide competition for students in 6th through 12th grades, and it is very similar to the science fair format. In this case, however, there are hundreds of students on the state level and thousands of students on the national level of NHD doing historical research and digging into historical events to create their projects. We are excited about how excited they are about history. National History Day gets students out of the classroom and into the world as historians. They're doing research and tracking down information about historic people and events. This research leads them to craft a thesis and build original conclusions shared through their different projects. I'll start by giving you a little background about National History Day as an organization and our institution as regional coordinators. National History Day itself began in April 1974 on the campus of Case Western Reserve University. The idea was the brainchild of history professor David Van Tassel, who was worried about the decline of the humanities in general and history in particular in America's schools. Today, the contest has every state participating, including Washington, D.C., Guam, American Samoa, and international affiliates in several different countries. The Mercer Museum and Fonthill Castle, operated by the Bucks County Historical Society, began as regional coordinators for Bucks and Montgomery counties in 1996. So when is this competition happening? Our Bucks-Mont National History Day competition will be held on Saturday, March 30th, 2019 at Delaware Valley University in Doylestown, PA. Before March 30th, there are a few other important dates. Paper judges will start their judging process on Wednesday, March 6th, next Wednesday, at the Mercer Museum, and website judges will start their process on Thursday, March 14th, also at the Mercer Museum. Paper and website judges have all received their entries ahead of time and will have the opportunity to review these before those nights. If you have not received an email about paper or website judging, that means that you are not judging in that category. The paper and website judging nights are the first step in the judging process for these categories. The second step will be on March 30th when students come to the competition to be interviewed about their papers and websites, just as all the other students competing that day. All other categories, documentaries, performances, and exhibits will be judged on March 30th at Del Valle University. The contest progression for National History Day in general starts on the school level. Many schools participate in school contests that then promote their students to the next level, which is regional. National History Day is sometimes part of a school's curriculum, but other times is voluntary for students. You'll notice the size of the arrows in this image get smaller, indicating that fewer students make it through each round. We are a regional contest, and the winners from our competition will move on to the state level and then hopefully to the national level. Our affiliate contest, the Pennsylvania State Contest, will take place on Friday, May 10th and Saturday, May 11th at Carlisle High School in Carlisle, PA. The national contest is held every summer at the University of Maryland in College Park, Maryland, and this year will take place June 9th through 13th. Though most of the entries you judge at our competition will not move on to the next level, it's our goal to provide all students with a positive and memorable experience that will encourage them to keep learning and reaching higher. I have mentioned already the different categories, and you will all be assigned to judge a certain category. They're papers, websites, performances, documentaries, and exhibits. The paper category is an individual-only category, meaning students cannot submit papers as groups. For the 4 other categories, submissions can be either individual or in groups of 2 to 5 students. Each category is also divided into junior and senior divisions. Junior is 6th through 8th grades, and senior is 9th through 12th grades. As an example, the documentary category will be divided into junior individuals, junior groups, senior individuals, and senior groups, and students will be judged based on these subcategories. The life cycle of a student project is usually between September and June. As I mentioned previously, some schools incorporate National History Day into their curriculum, and students will be talking about their projects with teachers and mentors, then choose what they want to do. They'll start the research process in September, and their project could extend all the way through June if they move on from regionals to states to nationals. After choosing their own topic, students do historical research, build a thesis, and analyze their sources. Their projects are not just book reports. Students analyze the information and come up with their own conclusions. This is all in the process of creating their entry. Then they move on to presenting it at the competition. Your part of that process is to give them constructive feedback on their projects. If they're moving on, feedback is helpful for them to tweak their projects and make them better for the next level. And if they don't move on, it's helpful if they continue on the following year, if they want to do it again, and to continue learning about research and critical analysis. So what is your role as a judge? Your role as a judge is to examine student projects, to interview the students about their process, to clarify understanding of the topic, and to evaluate all of these factors based on a rubric scale that has specific criteria and parameters. We will send out, paper and website judges have already received this, category assignments and instructions. You will receive sample judging forms to look at before the competition, and the specific category instructions are tailored to what you will be judging. As a judge, you are determining which students will move on to the state competition, and it's you who decides if the students have adequately explained their topics and related them to this year's theme of triumph and tragedy in history. Judge evaluation forms are one of the most important aspects of the contest, and we want to make them the best they can be. So we'll talk more about these specifics later on in our webinar. Ideal judges are kind, fair, thorough, clear, encouraging, positive, consistent, and they're team players because you all be working in judge teams together. Keeping these characteristics in mind will help make the student's process a successful one. I want to take some time to talk about National History Day's expectations of its judges. This is coming from the national organization. Judges should be friendly and put the students at ease. This means that no matter what level the students are on, what grade they're in, or how many times they've participated in National History Day, they're nervous, and we want our judges to help put them at ease in this process. Make sure to greet them and briefly explain the judging process so they feel more comfortable in the space. It's really important that we remain objective and that we're consistent with every single entry. The more consistently you judge the projects, the more accurate our ranking system can be. And you'll hear me repeat this a few times tonight. We ask that judges assume that every entry is the work of the students and not their teachers or parents. If you are very unsure or skeptical, you may ask about this in your interview section. Keep in mind that students are allowed to have some parental assistance with the construction of their projects. This is specifically in the exhibit and performance categories, with construction of their exhibit presentation, or in building or creating props for their performance. We aim to honor the anonymity of all entries. This means not asking personal questions like, what school are you from, or who's your teacher or mentor? Remember that every project has redeeming qualities. Though sometimes it might seem difficult to find something positive to put on your judge forms, try offering suggestions or thinking of positive feedback you would have liked to receive as a student. Here are the top 6 student expectations of judges that come from a 2013 survey done by NHD. So let's talk about what the students want from you as their judges. First, they want your full attention. Please remember to silence your cell phones so there are no distractions during the judging process for either you or the students. They want you to care about how much work they put into it. They want you to help them feel at ease, like we just talked about. Ask the student what they know and why they care about the project or that subject, and remember to avoid off-topic conversations. They are here to share their projects with you, so you want to ask insightful questions and keep the conversation about their project itself. Use your judging forms to tell them how they can improve. And lastly, we really just want to encourage them to keep learning and to stay excited about history. You've heard me mention the theme already, but this year's theme is Triumph and Tragedy in History. You should have all received a copy of this year's theme narrative to read before competition day. If you did not receive this document, please let us know and we're happy to send it along. The theme narrative explains more about how students should think about their topics, and it informs them on how to connect their projects to this year's specific theme. One of the main things they're doing is explaining their topic's relationship to the theme and its significance in history. Students don't have to address both aspects of the theme, but many will. The annual theme is broad on purpose, and we ask that judges keep an open mind about all the projects that they're viewing. You might personally like, dislike, be excited about, or be tired of seeing a certain project, but remember to consistently and fairly judge each student project regardless of your personal feelings. National History Day has rules for every entry and specific rules for every category. You've been sent a digital copy of the contest rulebook to review, but we will also have hard copies available on competition day for judges to consult as needed. The specific category instructions that you will be sent also give you a stronger sense of your category's needs. Though it might be tempting to just read the section of the rulebook for your category, I highly recommend that both new and old judges read the entire thing. We only do this competition once a year, so refreshing on the rules is very important. Having this set of rules helps us to compare projects as apples to apples, not apples to oranges. Many of these projects will be very close in your judging, and consulting the rules will help you when trying to determine which project might be ranked over another. You've seen the category breakdown already so far, so now we're going to talk about specifics for each one, including important parameters that judges will keep in mind. For the exhibit category, projects should resemble a museum-like exhibit, but on a smaller scale. The size dimensions for exhibits are 40 inches wide, 30 inches deep, and 6 feet wide, or 30 inches in diameter. Each judge team will have measuring tape when evaluating these exhibits as well. Before I start repeating more details, just remember that all of this information is also lined out in the contest rulebook. The word limit is 500 student-composed words and includes all the text that appears on or as part of the exhibit entry. This includes titles, subtitles, graphs, timelines, media devices, or any supplemental material like a booklet, handout, or photo album. Credit sources for images and quotations that are on the exhibit do not count towards the word limit. For more in-depth examples relating to your word count, again, consult the rulebook for questions. Some students will incorporate media, like music or a YouTube clip or video. Any student-composed narration in any media components are also subject to the word limit, so you'll want to consider that as well. For exhibits and websites specifically, a lot of students add a timeline. These are not required, though they are recommended because they're a helpful tool. Projects that do not include a timeline should not be penalized in the judging process. All of the exhibits will be in one location and organized like a gallery. You as judges will be given the information about which exhibits you are judging and where in the room they are located. Tables for exhibits will all be numbered so they're easy to find. Students are required to stay with their projects all day, not just at the time that they are being judged. We do not have a set time limit for the exhibit judging and interviewing process, but they will be treated in the same way as other categories, which will be 5 minutes for you to review their paper materials, 10 minutes to analyze the project, and 5 minutes to ask questions of the students. We'll talk more about this process in a little while. Documentaries and performances follow the same time limit that I just mentioned. 5 minutes for students setup while judges read their materials, 10 minutes for the film, and 5 minutes to take everything down or unplug while being asked questions. One judge on your team will be the timekeeper and use the stopwatch provided to keep track of these time limits. Note that you should not stop the student presentation at 10 minutes, but simply record on your judging evaluation forms if it goes over the limit. The students will come into the judging room and introduce themselves and their project, only saying their names and project title. Like we talked about before with the anonymity, we don't ask them to say their teachers or schools and kind of invoke any bias in that way. Family and friends or other spectators are allowed to watch documentaries and performance, so they should be welcomed into the room to observe. The production itself must be student narrated, and they must run their own equipment. For groups, it's useful to ask a question about how they split their time and who worked on which aspects of the project. It's also a good idea to try to ask one question of each student in the group if possible. This gives them all a chance to participate in the interviewing process. End credits are always required, but they must be readable. Some students try to save time by making their credits go by quickly, but you should be able to read most, if not all, of the credits. Lastly, there shouldn't be any judge or audience participation as it takes away from the time the students have for their film. The documentary itself should be similar to something we see on PBS or the History Channel in format, and should be documenting an event in history as it relates to the contest theme. The goal is for them to analyze their sources and information in a film format. Tech support will be available for the documentaries in case there are technical issues, and we will have IT support contact information available for judges in this category. If you do end up needing tech assistance, we ask that you keep the schedule moving and do not waste the students' time while waiting. If IT doesn't arrive within a couple minutes, you can move on to the next project in your schedule in order to make progress. When IT does arrive, they may have to wait a couple minutes while the current project finishes, but then you can go back to the project with technical difficulties. In these instances, we want to keep the students feeling okay with what's going on. Tech issues can cause panic because they think they're going to lose points. Most of the time, the tech issues are related to our equipment or compatibility, so students will not be docked any points. If the issues are clearly due to their project and some part of its production, you can note that in your judging forms and consider that in your ranking process. If all technical support fails, you can watch their presentation on a laptop and they will not be penalized for that. We will have a laptop in each of the documentary judging rooms available in case they are needed. As with documentaries, performances have a time limit. 5 minutes for setup, 10 minutes for the performance, and 5 minutes for takedown and interviewing. Again, students introduce themselves and their project. Your timekeeper will keep track of the stopwatch. We ask that you hold short applause until after the performance so you don't take away from their time allotment. Also, if you plan to applaud, make sure to be consistent and do so with every entry. Their performances must be original, and they're not permitted to use something that is already written. The performers themselves should have a degree of stage presence that helps them convey the significance of their topic and how it relates to the theme. We will get into the paperwork handed in by students in a few slides, but the important thing to know for performances is that students do not need to give you their scripts. If they include any other media in their performance, the students are expected to also run this on their own. Costumes can be rented or bought, but the idea behind the costume choice should be the student's idea. Remember that these are not Broadway shows, and that some student costumes might be more elaborate than others, but this should not reflect highly on their project. We've already talked a little about how papers and websites have a two-part judging process. The first part occurs at the Mercer Museum on their respective judging nights. Prior to this evening judging session, please note that all judges should have already read papers and reviewed websites on their own. The pre-contest judging for papers and websites respectively are very similar to each other, so we'll talk about them together. On the designated evening, either Wednesday, March 6th for papers or Thursday, March 14th for websites, judges will arrive at the Mercer Museum at 6 p.m. and sit with their team member or members. Each judge will be given either hard copies of their papers or laptops to view websites. Category judging instructions will be included, as well as a rule book and official evaluation sheets for each entry. If you have notes that you took ahead of time while reviewing the paper or website, please bring those with you. The first part of the evening will be time for judge teams to discuss entries, take notes on the official forms, and rank the entries they viewed. During the second part of the evening, lead judges and assistant lead judges who are designated ahead of time will come together to deliberate the category as a whole. From this deliberation should come a preliminary ranking of first, second, and third place. This will not be the final places, as they're subject to change after the competition day interviews. The second part of paper and website judging occurs on competition day when students are interviewed about their work. The lead judges and assistant leads who are conducting the interviews will be sent any additional submissions before competition day to review. Students should be at the competition for their paper or website interviews, and if you have any students who did not come for the contest, they will not be eligible to win first, second, or third prize. This can then be marked on your judging forms. Papers are our most traditional form of historical research, and websites are the most interactive of all the categories. For interviews, each student will be given 10 minutes to answer questions from judges. Papers are limited to 2,500 student-composed words, not including their notes, annotated bibliography, any illustration captions, or appendix material. Websites are limited to 1,200 student-composed words. The rulebook details more about the word count for all categories if you want information about specifics. Interview notes for papers and websites need to be put on the judging form that already has comments from the review process previously. Some students are really great with interviews, and some of them might need some constructive criticism on how to be a bit better. It's your job as a judge to help them with this learning process through your comments. Students will not be providing judges with judge forms for these two categories because you will have the judge forms from your specific category judging night in your day of packet materials. Also, just a note, no paper or website judges will be alone with students for interviews. You'll be sharing your room with other judges in your category who are also conducting interviews simultaneously. We recommend that you do not allow family or friends to sit in on interviews as they might for documentaries and performances, as it can be distracting and a little intimidating as well. I want to pause here just to see if we have any questions so far. None that I can see in the chat, so I'm going to keep going and we can talk more about the questions at the end. Now that we've talked about each category, let's get into the process of actually judging projects. All judges work in judging teams with lead judges and assistant lead judges. We like to have someone who has judged before as our lead judge, not so they can have a greater power than other judges, but more so they can act as a guide for new ones. 3 judges per team is ideal, but 2 judge teams are also acceptable. You will know if you're a lead judge because it will be indicated on the outside of your judge packet that you pick up the morning of the March 30th competition. Lead judges for paper and website competitions have already been notified if they are leads or assistant leads. The lead judge's role is to help guide the team toward consensus and keep the forms for each judging category organized. Before we talk more about judging teams, we ask that all of our judges, when you receive your student schedules, to please let us know as soon as possible if you recognize any of your student names. We would like to address any of these problems sooner rather than later. Let's talk about judging team breakdown. We're going to use junior group exhibits just as an example. Each category has a lead judge for the entire category. Junior group exhibits, senior individual exhibits, papers, etc. all have one lead judge. Teams will then also have assistant lead judges who help report their ranking information and judge evaluations to the lead judge. Once all of the judging and deliberating in teams is finished, you move on to the next step in the process. After each team is finished judging, assistant leads bring their team's rankings together with other assistant leads and the lead judge. They are the ones who come to an overall consensus. At this point, all the leads and assistant leads combined have viewed the subject matter, viewed the projects, talked to the students, and everything is finished. That means it's time to figure out rankings and the overall order of the student projects. So as we talked about, the lead judge keeps everything together and organized. If you're a lead judge, it's your job to make sure that all the paperwork gets turned in to Judge Central together. This includes the judge evaluation forms, process papers, annotated bibliography, and the overall category ranking sheet, which indicates the projects that win first, second, or third place. On competition day, all judging starts at 9 a.m. and all ranking sheets need to be turned in to staff in Judge Central no later than 12:15 p.m. This gives our staff the time to prepare for the awards ceremony that happens around 1:15 or 1:30. And if judge ranking forms are not turned in on time, that category cannot be announced at the awards ceremony. We want all the winning students to have recognition at the ceremony, so please, please remember to get your forms in on time. So speaking of judging forms, let's get into what it is you're evaluating. On the judge evaluation forms, there are 3 categories: historical quality, relation to theme, and clarity of presentation. Historical quality is by far the most important factor for judging and should be given a lot of your attention. Students are not just memorizing and recounting facts. They should be interpreting and analyzing those facts through their project. The project must have a strong thesis statement, and students must have a conclusion based on their research. They should be reflecting on their topic from a historical perspective, which might include causes and consequences, relationship of a local event to a larger significance, etc. There should be a balance of primary and secondary sources, considering a variety of viewpoints. We are looking for projects that offer thoughtful analysis with well-rounded conclusions at the end. When considering relation to theme, students should be clearly stating why their topic is significant in history and how it relates to the theme of triumph and tragedy. Remember, Fame does not necessarily mean significance. Just because a person or event is famous does not necessarily mean it is significant. And we want students to be explaining to judges why they think their topic is significant and how their sources help to prove that statement. Lastly, clarity of presentation is all about the project's presentation itself, the appearance, the grammar in their text, and their use of equipment. Some projects might be very well executed, beautiful, or elaborate, but if the historical significance in relation to theme are not well represented, you will want your evaluation to reflect that. Just because it's cute doesn't mean it wins. Make sure to ask important questions in your interview so that you can have time to dig deeper into the student's project and work. My apologies for the phone ringing in the background that you might all be hearing right now. First, we'll go into interviewing students, and next we'll talk about how to make the most of your comments on the judge forms. One of the most important things to keep in mind as judges is that you want to be consistent with all the students and projects you see at the competition. Greet all students the same way and ask very similar questions about each entry or each project. Beware of your bias in relation to particular topics as well. Competition day is a time when students are teaching you about their topic, not the other way around. You should demonstrate the same degree of interest regardless of topic. You might have seen the same topic multiple times in a day, but remember that each of those times is with different students who have produced different projects. Make sure you stick to your schedule. We recommend that you have specific questions ready to ask so your interview time can go efficiently. Ask questions, thank the students for their time, and move on to the next project in your schedule. As we talked about earlier, exhibits do not have a specific time limit, but you should give it the same amount of time as documentaries or performances, a 20-minute time slot. You can always go back and look at exhibits again if you need to, because they will be on display during the entire competition. Check in about your own body language and facial expressions. Students are nervous, and both of these things can really affect how students feel in the room at the time of judging. Last, but definitely not least, take notes as you go. This will greatly help you later on in deliberation and consensus. Future you will thank past you for taking a lot of notes. Judge comments are very important because they not only explain your rankings, but also provide feedback to the students about their projects. Constructive and positive comments will help students grow as learners and help them create successful projects in the future. Simply writing, "Your project is disorganized," does not help a student know how to make it better. You're supposed to expect quality on these projects, but you also want to remember that you're evaluating the work of middle and high school students. They're learning the process of historical research and project development. So National History Day, as much as it is about learning and education, is about competition. Deliberate together with your judge teams, reach consensus, and you want to fill out your judge forms while talking together as a group. This allows you to bounce ideas off each other and frame your individual viewpoint of the project. Do not write the exact same comments on every judge's form for a single project, but instead let the deliberation process inform how you fill out your personal evaluation forms. So why are we doing this? Our biggest goal is to encourage these students to keep learning and growing. We can do this through constructive comments and feedback and providing them with a welcoming, positive environment to present their research. You, our judges, are here to help us do this. Next, we're going to go into the procedure for judging each student project. Overall, the process will be broken down this way: greet, read, view, question, and discuss. So here are the procedures for the entries. What you see in front of you is applicable to the documentary and performance categories, and then can be adapted for the paper, website, and exhibit categories. If you're a documentary or performance judge, the first thing you'll do is close the door to your judging classroom. As I mentioned before, family and friends might be interested in watching and are more than welcome to sit in the room during the presentation. It's important as the judges to ask any guests in the room to silence their cell phones and to please hold their applause until the end of the project. After you've addressed guests in the room, you'll want to greet the students themselves. This is when they introduce themselves and their projects. Before any presentation of work begins, you will ask the students for their process papers and annotated bibliographies. Then take the first 5 minutes to read and review the materials while they set up for their presentation. You can say, as you set up your project, we're going to read through your process paper and annotated bibliography. When we're ready, we'll let you know when to begin. This allows your judging team to go over their materials and let the students know when their 10-minute presentation window is going to occur. Once they start their presentation, one judge will start the stopwatch and keep track of the time. After the students have finished presenting, you will conduct the interview as they take down their project or unplug their equipment. Make sure to thank the students for their time and effort. They've worked really hard on these projects. Take plenty of notes as you go, like we mentioned, but remember to use pencil in case anything needs to be changed later. Lastly, do your best to stay on schedule with your timing. The better job we do at staying on schedule, the easier our day will be for everyone involved. For paper and website judges, you will just skip the third and fourth step of this process. For exhibit judges, you can take this as an outline to guide your judging process since you do not have a set time limit. We'll now talk about the do's and don'ts for interviewing students. There are two major types of questions your judging team will be trying to ask. First, ask a few broad and general questions. This helps set the students at ease and shows them that the interview process is not a scary one. You can see some sample questions here, and we'll have this printed for all judges as part of your packet on competition day. How does your topic relate to this year's theme? Why did you choose it? How did you begin your research process? What was your most important source and why? Why did you pick this category? Then you'll want to also ask at least one question about the substance of their topic and project. Think about what you read in the process paper. Here you can ask about student methodology, ask how they came to their conclusions. Think about questions that draw out the information you want to know while still keeping in mind that every single project needs to be able to stand alone. Ask yourselves as judges, if there was no student standing in front of me, would this project stand alone? Does it tell me what I need to know? Do I understand it? These are the types of questions and thought processes behind the questioning that can be helpful for all judges, regardless of category. So here are some interview don'ts that you'll want to be aware of while judging and try to avoid. Don't lecture the students about their topic. The interview is a time for the students to add to their project and not for judges to talk through the 5 minutes. 5 minutes goes quickly. Please don't make any comments about how they did overall in comparison to other students or projects, and avoid saying anything like, "This was the best project I've seen all day." The interview is also not the time to offer suggestions for improvement. Your comments on the judge evaluation forums will serve that purpose. Though we've already said it tonight, remember that you might be biased toward or against any certain project. Try to be aware of this and prevent it from affecting how you judge. Be thoughtful in your comments and use the interview time to hear from the students. If there are guests watching the presentations, do your best to separate where you, the judges, are sitting from where the audience is in the room. This helps students focus on the judges more during the interview process. At this point, you've heard me talk about different types of forms and paperwork that you'll be receiving, so I wanted to start to go over those in detail. Some materials will be in your judge packet, and some will be given to you by students before they present their work to you. The first thing you will look at are the process papers and annotated bibliographies. Only documentary, performance, and exhibit judges will be given copies of these by students. Process papers and annotated bibliographies have already been reviewed by paper and website judges in the entries ahead of time. Some students, be aware, may give you a change of title form. Throughout their project's life cycle, the project name or category might be changed. If they hand you the form, please attach it to the rest of your judge forms to be turned in at the end of the process. This allows judges to know what the new project is called and allows administrators in Judge Central to sort through the correct projects in the later filing system. For documentary, performance, and exhibit judges, students will hand you their judge evaluation forms. Each judge on the judging team will get one, and there is only one set per entry. This means that groups will be still handing you only one form, not one form per student in the group. Paper and website judges will be given their evaluation forms already filled in with comments from the earlier judging nights held at the Mercer Museum. The judging forms for each category are different colors to help us all tell them apart. Yellow for documentary, pink for performance, green for exhibit, blue for website, and white for papers. You will see a red number in the upper right-hand corner of all judge forms that helps us indicate which school each entry goes to on the back end of filing. This number helps us sort judge forms into the correct school bags later on. And this is important for judges because it's a reminder that students will be receiving these judge forms after the competition. Keep that in mind when you're writing your comments. One of the required materials students will hand to judges is their process paper. This is a must for performance, documentary, exhibit, and website entries. If you are a website judge conducting an interview on competition day, you will have already seen it included on the website and reviewed it ahead of time. Process papers are limited to 500 words, and students will be explaining how they went about their research, how they picked their particular topic, and how they see it relating to the theme. Before you view the presentation, at least take a moment to skim this so you have an idea of what questions you might want to ask during your interview. You can always go back and read the process papers more thoroughly later during your deliberation process. The annotated bibliography should be seen as the heart of the project. It documents the student's research, which is what makes up the foundation of every entry. The annotated bibliography should be divided into primary and secondary sources to indicate how many of each they used. You want to look for a balance here. Their annotations should explain how the work was used in producing the project and how it was useful in their research. As with the process papers, annotated bibliographies will be integrated into papers and websites and should have been viewed already as part of the judging process. For the other categories, students will hand you a copy of their annotated bibliography along with their process papers. While we're talking about sources, I want to briefly talk about the difference between primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are materials directly related to a topic by time or participation. This means something written or produced in the time period they are researching, such as letters, diaries, newspaper articles, oral history interviews, documents, images, artifacts, or any first-hand accounts. Secondary sources are materials about a topic, usually based on the interpretation of primary sources. This includes textbooks, other non-fiction books about the specific topic, biographies, or journal articles. There are more details about primary and secondary sources in your contest rulebook as well if you're looking for more information. Quickly, this is just to show you what the change of title form looks like in case you receive one. We will make sure they stand out like this one in hot pink. You as the judge will make sure it is fully filled out and then is turned in with the judging forms to Judge Central. As far as your actual judge paperwork goes, you will see two main forms. The category ranking forms will be only in a lead judge's packet. This is what will be turned in to Judge Central with the first, second, and third place rankings. You will want to get together with your judging team to come to a consensus on placement first. Each judge in that division and category will sign the consensus form before it's turned in. The second piece of paperwork you'll primarily be dealing with is the judge evaluation forms that I've mentioned many times already. This is where you write all your comments on the projects, and these will be turned into Judge Central with the process paper and annotated bibliographies. Remember, the students will be getting these back so that they can review what the comments are from their judges. This is an example of the judge evaluation form. On the left-hand side, this is an example of the judge ranking form. that lead judges will have in their papers, in their packets. Now, this is an example of the judge evaluation form. On the left-hand side, you'll see the form in its entirety. It has a rubric on the left and has space to make comments and add your feedback on the right. On the right of this slide, you can see a close-up of the rubric broken down into 3 sections. These are the 3 sections we talked about earlier: historical quality, relation to theme, and clarity of presentation. You might find this table helpful when thinking about your evaluation forms. It's a breakdown of ideas to turn thoughts into constructive comments. Some of the examples you see here are, instead of saying, "This project needs a lot of work," you can say, "You're off to a good start, but consider strengthening your project by doing X, Y, or Z." Instead of saying, "The documentary sound quality was awful," you can say, "The poor audio quality of your documentary distracted from the overall project. Consider testing your audio on different systems or with different settings ahead of time." This is just to give you an idea of how to word constructive comments so students can learn from them. Now we'll take a look at a few bad and a few good judging forms. This is an unacceptable evaluation form. There are a few specific things we want to talk about with regards to this form. First and foremost, do not put the actual ranking anywhere on the judge evaluation forms. Students get these back, and it's not appropriate to return it with their ranking, even if they win. Even writing it in pencil and erasing it is not a good idea because you might change them from a 2 to a 3, and they can often still see it behind. If you need to make changes to your rankings and want to sketch them out ahead of time, all judge packets will have scrap paper to take extra notes. Second thing to look at here is the comments. "Good job, awesome props, love your topic." These comments don't tell the student anything about how well they did or what they could possibly do to improve. Judge comments should be more thought out and actually offer feedback on the student's work. Next, as with the ranking on top, you don't want to include any type of comment that indicates what place the student earned or what place you thought they deserved. Comments like these are not constructive and can instead confuse students and cause them a little bit of anxiety over their project. Looking at the rubric, you can see that the judge clearly thought this project was superior and deserved all superior check marks. Though it's rare to see a project that should get all top marks, even if that is the case, we want to include as many comments as possible to tell them why they earned such a high ranking. Lastly, there's a lot of empty space at the bottom of this form that could be filled in with something constructive. You'll be filling the forms out alongside your judging team as well. Your forms do not have to be identical, but if one judge thought the project was superior and another gave it poor marks, this should be talked about in your deliberation process and then altered as needed. As I've said before, and will say again, consistency is key in the judging process. Here we're looking at a better example. The comments are positive and the criticism is phrased constructively. Specific criticisms are backed up with examples, and the comments support the check marks on the left. You want to make sure your comments inform your check marks on the rubric. If you comment that they used great sources, but checked that their sources were weak, this discrepancy, again, will be confusing. This example is definitely better, but it still has room for improvement. So what's bad about it? More could have been said about why the interview and sources were so impressive. You want to elaborate on your comments to give more specifics. The judge could have also written more about the topic's relationship to the theme. It's a good idea to have at least one comment about each of the 3 rubric categories. There's also plenty of room at the bottom for a few more comments to include here. Try to give the students as much as you can, because the more feedback they get, the better their projects can be in the future and the more they can learn. So here's an even better example. Lots of positive reinforcement and feedback, but the criticisms are also phrased in a constructive way. When offering a critique of the project, you should try to give the student examples of where you're seeing the need for improvement. The comments and rubric checkmarks support each other, and it overall ends on a positive note. Even if a project is not a category winner and you think it needed a lot of improvement, thanking students for their participation really does go a long way. This form is well thought out and it helps us achieve our goal of teaching students and helping them grow. In order to get all of your judge evaluation and ranking forms in by 12:15, you'll want to get together with your team to make a plan. You want to plan ahead of time of where you'd like to do your deliberating. This can be done in Judge Central, it can be done in the classroom where your judging is taking place, or elsewhere depending on your preferences as a group. To quicken the process and stay on schedule, you'll want to hold your discussion about each project until you've seen all of them and you're sitting down together. This means that do not take time in between projects to talk about the one you've just witnessed, because it will throw off the timing schedule and then you'll end up behind. Keep in mind when choosing where to deliberate that there will be students, teachers, family, and friends around in public spaces, and you do not want to be somewhere where your deliberation can be overheard. The best place to start in deliberation is with who to eliminate. This helps you quickly narrow down your entries before going into specifics about each one. The goal is to come to a consensus with your group, and remember that even if your judging evaluation forms are not exactly the same, they should all be in the same ballpark. As we've talked about already, your forms should provide positive but also critical evaluations of student projects, and you want to remember that these are young students, not yet at college level. In this process of deliberation, any assistant lead judges have an important role. They will be deliberating with their judging team, then serve as an ambassador for those rankings to communicate the team's decisions to the lead judge. The lead judge and assistant leads will meet to deliberate as well, then fill out the final ranking form from there. In short, regular judges meet with their team to deliberate. Assistant lead judges then take those deliberations to the lead judge, and the lead judge deliberates with assistant leads and fills out the final form to turn in by 12:15. You may have questions about infractions and disqualifications as well. This table is helpful for deciphering what counts as a minor infraction, a major infraction, or cause for disqualification. Both minor and major infractions should be noted in the comments of your judge evaluation forms. Minor infractions should not prevent any project from advancing, but can be considered more when looking to break a tie or looking at two entries that are very close to each other. Any projects with major infractions, however, should not rank first, second, or third. Then three very specific things can cause disqualification. The three causes of disqualification are plagiarism, reusing an entry or part of an entry from a previous year, and tampering with another student's entry. Something important to note, no entries are disqualified on the spot by the judges. Any questions you have where you might be concerned an entry broke one of these offenses should be reported to the administrative staff in Judge Central. We'll be the ones to investigate and take action. Refrain from asking direct questions about these offenses in your interview portion, but if you have doubts, you can bring it to us as the administrators. Disqualification is hard to prove, but we want to do everything possible to make the competition fair for all students. As you see on this slide, I have included my cell phone number that can be called or texted at any point during the day of March 30th. As we get to the end of our training tonight, I want to quickly debunk a few National History Day myths that have become common. These relate to some specific categories as well. For exhibit and website judges, remember that timelines are not required. Even though they're a helpful tool, student projects don't need to have them to move on. Performance judges should remember that songs are also not required. They certainly can add to a project, but projects without songs can be just as good, if not better, than performances with songs. In documentaries, student-conducted interviews or oral history interviews are also not required. They can be included, but having an actual interview by students is not a must. Student-conducted interviews themselves are a must, but they do not have to be shown in the documentary. For all judges, remember that glitz doesn't win. If a project is beautiful and catches your eye, that's great. And we want to make sure that the historical research, the relation to theme, and the clarity of their project are also there. Lastly, just remember there is no winning formula for a student entry. They come in all shapes and sizes, so keep an open mind and consider each project with a fresh eye. I've mentioned a couple times that you will be getting a packet on the day of the competition. Let's quickly review what will be in this packet for you. When you arrive at Delaware Valley University on March 30th, you'll check in at Judge Central. This location will be sent out, and information about parking will also be sent out ahead of time. When you check in, you'll receive your judge packet. Inside it, you will find your project schedule with your judge team list, an agenda for the day, your judge badge name tag that you can wear. Lead judges will have a ranking form. All judges will get scrap evaluation forms to take notes, sample interview questions, and some general information like campus maps and the event program. On competition day, judge check-in will begin at 7:30 a.m. We will have coffee and breakfast available in Judge Central for you to have in the morning or throughout the day. All judges must arrive by 8:15 a.m. when we will hold a short on-site judge orientation. This will go over information about judging and give any additional information or updates that judges need to know for that day. All categories begin judging at 9 a.m. and judging officially ends at 12:15 p.m. when your evaluation and ranking forms are due to Judge Central. After turning in your forms, we ask that judges stay to watch the awards ceremony. Students love to see their judges out in the audience as they accept their awards. The awards ceremony will be starting between 1:15 and 1:30. So that was a whole bunch of information in a very small amount of time, and I want to leave time for questions. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat and we can go over them before concluding the webinar tonight. So here I see a question. Will each judge have evaluation forms for each entry? Yes, judges will have evaluation forms for each entry, and you will not be sharing your evaluation forms with the other judges on your team. You will be filling them out individually with your own personal comments. Specifically to Robert's question about not getting the theme narrative, you can email the email address that is right here on this slide, historyday@mercermuseum.org, to let us know, and we will be able to send you anything you have not received. Lunch will not be provided, but there will be many options for lunch on the campus of Del Val University. Their dining room will be open, there will be Starbucks, and there will be some other snack areas for you to purchase your own lunches or snacks if you want to stay. Another question we have is, when will we find out what category we are judging? That's a great question. Paper and website judges have already been notified. The other three categories, documentaries, performances, and exhibits, will also be notified very shortly, but because you do not have to review anything ahead of time, we are still working on those placements. Are the entries to provide process papers to each judge in the performance category? Also a great question, and yes, they are. Each student is told in their instructions that they are given that they are to provide bring 3 copies of their process paper, 3 copies of their annotated bibliography, and then when they pick up their student packets, that will have their evaluation forms to present to each judge as well. Any other questions tonight? So as you can see here on this side, if you think of any questions that you weren't able to ask tonight or that come to you later, please feel free to email us at historyday@mercermuseum.org or call me, Olivia, at my office phone number 215-345-0210, extension 171. If there are no more questions, I just want to let you all know that the recording of this webinar will be posted and we will send that link to all of you. So even if you need to check back in on the webinar, something you may have missed, or want to review the category once you know your category assignments, you will have this video recording. Lastly, I just want to say thank you all so much. Thank you for listening to this training webinar and for donating your time to the Bucks and Montgomery County's regional competition for National History Day. We truly, truly could not do this without you, and we are so lucky to have you participating with us this year. Thank you all for attending this training, and have a great night.